Amina Powell to give her perspective on that day.
When I think about May 8th, a lot of times it brings tears to my eyes because it was so unnecessary. We were in the office at the time, and as Sister Dana had spoken, she and Sister Robbie were outside. And they had yelled into the office that there was officers outside who had guns, and they were coming towards us. So immediately, I ran downstairs into the office that we had downstairs to find out what was going on. And from that point, some of the officers had made it down to where we were, and we had an office in the back downstairs that had two large sliding doors. And they had kicked that door in, glass shattered everywhere. Once that happened, I ran out of the building to go next door to my home, and there were children there, and I was trying to make sure that they were okay and let them know what was going on, because they didn't have a means of knowing what was going on. And by the time that I'd gotten in there, other officers had come through the front of the door, and they were attempting to kick that door in, and you could hear the wood breaking from the frame. I ran into the other portion of my house, grabbed as many of the kids as I could, and there was another girl with me. She was a little older, in her 20s, and she had her child with her too, who was about 2 or 3 months. And we had gone to a portion of the building where we were attempting to get out from the back, but there was 2 officers already stationed out there, and they had their guns drawn. As we tried to go back into the other part, the officers had already made their way into the section where we were. They had kicked in that door as well, because as I came in, I slammed it. And basically, some of the other kids that were with us had already ran upstairs to hide. And I was in the kitchen, and the young lady had said to me, well, what are we going to do now? I said, well, right now there's really nothing that we can do. That officer outside is watching us, and we're watching them. And by that time, the other officers that were coming from behind had ran in. You could see him coming around slowly in the room. And because we were in the kitchen and there was a curtain that was blocking, he was saying, who's in there, come out. And I said, well, there's no one in here. It's an adult, it's 2 adults, and it's a baby. So he said, come out with your hands up. Come out with your hands up. So I came out, my hands up, put them behind me, and I asked him, I said, well, what is this all about? Why are you here? And he said, well, we had a warrant to arrest, and it's not you. And I said, well, if it's not me, why are you holding a gun to my face? And from that point, other officers had ran through past us, and they were screaming, we need backup, we need backup, we need backup. And I said, you don't need backup because there's nobody back there. It's just us. So he said, and by that time I started putting my hands down because I didn't understand why was he standing in front of me with an AK-47 and he wasn't there to arrest me. So he started screaming again, put your hands up, so I did. And I put them in front of me, and then we started walking out because he was behind us. So she has a baby in her hand. He had the gun to the baby's head. Open area. The kids were very hysterical. They were crying. There was a lot of young kids, you know, ranging from infancy on up to like 10, even if that much. And they were crying, and they didn't understand what was going on. As we walked out to leave the building, well, they were bringing people from other locations into the building where we were, and they had officers standing around, and, you know, their guns were raised. To me, it was unnecessary, that level of force. We did not need. It wasn't necessary at all. And I started asking questions. Who are you arresting? What is the problem? Who is it that you're coming here for with this type of force? And one of the officers did say that it was Reverend Malachi Zioff. That's what he said. And I was like, it threw me off because I couldn't think of any reason why they would be there for him like that. And like, the first thoughts was in my mind was, okay, well, Seal's father got what he had wanted for years. he had been trying to stage some type of Waco. There were times that they had rolled up on the property with, quite a few officers and cars and trucks and different things like that. Once was to close down put a couple of padlocks on a club that we had. Other times just to come to inspect the building. It's like, why? At that point, when we had to leave the building where we were to go over to the temple, when I looked outside, it was officers everywhere, men in army fatigues and women, and I couldn't imagine. I'm like, in my mind, why? What were the charges? And when he stated the charges, I was like, come on, this is ridiculous. That's how I felt. This is ridiculous. I questioned different officers as I approached them, and some of them didn't even know why they were there. It was like hearsay. Well, I think it's for money charges. Oh, okay. Well, I think it's for alleged child molestation. I was like, oh, okay. They really didn't have an idea. But the thing that's most devastating was the fact that all these years, that was on my mind, is that the sheriff of the town had finally gotten what he had wanted. For many years, like I said, we were fighting. Going back to 1993 when we first got there, this was prior to even the sheriff getting into office. We moved down to Tamaray. It wasn't called Tamaray at that time. It was just our home. And quite a few people moved down. It was a very beautiful place. Doors were open to everyone. People drove up to the door, actually, knocked on it. It was like that. It wasn't until later on, a few years later, not even a few years later, about a couple of years later, that we really, had to put a guard at the front, because as we started building Tamaray, going back and forth, into town, trying to comply to their wishes as far as zoning and everything. Prior to that, some of the people in town, a circle of people in town, had launched a subtle attack on us. They would drive by in big trucks or, Chevy trucks with guns. And at that time, nobody was armed. Nobody, wasn't even thinking in terms of, having a need to protect themselves. They would shoot at the property, just open fire. And if anybody was out there, anybody could have gotten killed. They would throw beer cans and shout racist remarks, shine bright lights onto the property. And it wasn't until that point that the men were saying that we have to do something to protect ourselves, to protect our families. And we did go into, comply. We called the officers, the police officers, they made their reports and different things like that. However, it didn't stop the locals. And as time went on, we continued to build. We still opened our doors. We built a club, and they continued to come out to harass us. And it got to a point where it just got scary to a certain point, because you never know what they were going to do next. So when May 8th happened, it was one of those things that you felt like, okay, well, this is it. He finally got what he had wanted. And I guess at this point we might as well, think that it's over with. Because